We're going to draft like your dad. Our forefathers used dial-up internet to draft running back after running back after running back at the start of their drafts to build their fantasy teams back in the day. They spent first round, second round, third round picks getting their running backs before looking at other positions. Today, we're going to look at the robust RB strategy to see whether or not it works here in 2024. But before you dig in, you need to click that subscribe button right now. We're helping you build your fantasy teams. We're going through these strategies day in, day out, so you know what to do when it comes time for you to draft. When to get your wide receivers, when to get your running backs. You will be prepared, and then we will work the waiver wire all season long together. Click that button. Stop missing out. But the other day, we started off by looking at the double hero RB strategy, where you drafted 2 running backs in the first 3 rounds of your draft. Then you ignored the position and started drafting up running backs later. Now we're going old school. Some people will say this strategy does not work. Some people will say they won some championships with it. They roll with it. They're looking to do this in their leagues this year. You will hear that in the comments below. I will promise you. But we're going to look at this strategy. We're going to use ADP from Underdog Fantasy and the FFPC. So we're going to be looking at 2 ADPs at once. And then we're going to look in broad terms, macroeconomic style. Because you know what's going to happen when you get in your home leagues. People are going to start drafting running backs more than usual, more than what ADP says, and you want to be prepared for that, and you want it more realistic. So if we talk in broad terms, we can talk more towards your league or towards this guy's league. That being said, let's get this started. Let's look at the first round. We're going to start off here with Underdog Fantasy, and of course, we got running backs coming off the board. Christian McCaffrey, the 101 right now in ADP. Bijan and Breece Hall in the middle, Jahmyr Gibbs on the back end. So if you're going to start this strategy, if you got the first pick, you're going Christian McCaffrey. If you're in the 102 to 106 range, you're probably going to pay up a little bit for a Bijan or Breece Hall. In the middle is a sweet spot for them. And then if you got the 112, you're on the turn. You're in a good spot to go double up on running back. So this makes sense, but this is also a different set of ADP since it's best ball. But when we look at FFPC ADP, we're looking at leagues that have higher stakes on them. They're also trying to be a little bit more ahead of the curve because they're trying to predict out what's happening in a training camp, the start of the season. That being said, Christian McCaffrey, still the 101. Breece and Bijan in the middle, but jacked up a few picks. Jahmyr Gibbs on the back end of the first round. Very similar. So if you are on the tail end of the snake here and you're double dipping at the 112 and the 201, that's a good spot to double up at running back if you really want to. All things is very similar when you look at both sets of ADP. The middle of the draft, you got your 2 backs, 101, Christian McCaffrey. You can pick your poison there if you really want to implement this strategy. The caveat to all this, you are leaving elite wide receivers on the board. Top tier wide receivers, which is something you may not want to do. You may want to have one of those guys on your team when presented, because wide receivers can get you top tier fantasy points, and wide receiver is a harder position to backfill if something happens when it comes to injuries or random events. But that being said, when you look at the running back position, there are certain spots of your draft position where you can definitely take advantage at running back, but you have to really win it here in the second round, and the second round's getting pretty interesting here. We got Devin Achane, Saquon Barkley here at the top. So on the turn, you got 3 running backs to look at with them and Jahmyr Gibbs. Jonathan Taylor's down a bit at 210. They're in Underdog Fantasy. We also got some wide receivers that are coming high off the board, but some of those wide receivers also have some question marks. So this might be a good spot to get your RB2 here in this strategy, which if you're implementing it, you have to. But looking at FFPC here, and you're looking at the running back, Saquon 16th off the board here, and then you got Achane and Henry coming off the board as well. So you got more running backs to look at, making the strategy very interesting. So also, if you're picking in the middle of the draft, 1-6 range, you got some running backs to look at. You can go Derrick Henry, Bijan Robinson. You can look at some other running backs that are not listed here. Maybe you want to jump up Kyren Williams or something like that. You have some options here when you're looking at your drafts. But when you are thinking about this, the third round is very important because you're anchoring down this position. And when we're anchoring it down in the third round, you have to look at what's available. Running backs fall a little bit deeper on Underdog Fantasy. It's best ball. Also, they're trying to be a little bit more sharper over there. But again, you got 2 running backs coming off the board. You go to FFPC. You got Kyren Williams coming off the board in the third. You got Isaiah Pacheco jumping up in ADP. That being said, you're going to have to reach possibly on a 4th round running back here as well, because some of these running backs in your home league drafts are going to get drafted up earlier than expected. You still have some good wide receivers of value here, but again, if you're going with your RB3, you're going to have to forego that. That is part of the strategy, but you're going to be very strong at running back and a top end at flex, and you're going to have some depth there as well. If you're worried about injuries at the position, say one of those running backs get hurt, you still have an RB1 and an RB2, so you might feel safe with that. However, you are foregoing some top tier wide receivers, and the wide receiver position, although it's very deep, it tears off a bit, and the consistency and the top tier production combined with that starts to go away as we get deeper with the draft. So that's something to focus on as we're looking at these picks here. But the 4th round, Travis Etienne, Pacheco for Underdog Fantasy, you're seeing it tear off with the wide receivers. I like T. Higgins and George Pickens if you're shooting for upside. Terry McLaurin, you got a faithful veteran there. If you're wanting to be safe, you can go Christian Kirk. And then you're looking at the FFPC where things are starting to change up a bit. Rachaad White jumping up there because he gets work in the passing game. He gets a lot of volume. Josh Jacobs up there because he's expected to get a lot of volume with the Packers. James Cook because he gets workload with the Bills. So things are starting to mount up here at the running back position here in round 4. And some of those guys, if you're wanting to hammer the strategy home, you may have to look at them in round 3. This might cause you to reach on a running back. However, sometimes when you're drafting, you accidentally get into this strategy because a running back will fall to you at value in round 1. A running back will fall to you at value in round 2. You may not like the receivers on the board in round 3, so you pay up for the next running back. And next thing you know, you got 3 running backs coming off the board. That sometimes happens, so you might catch yourself in this scenario even though you don't like it. And there are people that draft 4 rounds deep at running back here, even though I don't suggest that it happens. And we look at the board here in the 4th round, we have some running backs to look at. And when you look at the position pool at running back here, we're going 5 rounds deep. According to Underdog Dynasty, I threw in Rachaad White because I think he needs to get some exposure there. Joe Mixon as well, going in round 6, another guy to look at. But if you get 3 of these running backs, you're going to be very strong at the position. I think you're getting too greedy if you go 4, but some people do it. Some people do it and they win leagues because they got to hit on the back end at the wide receiver and tight end positions. And if you do, you're going to be golden. But also the fragility at the running back position is something you got to talk about because running backs get hurt. And then when it comes to the running back position, the backups are easy to forecast volume for. So drafting backup running backs in the back half of the draft and just being stockpiled on them, eventually some starters are going to go down, and you can take advantage of that starter being down and that backup just walking in the workload, and they will get you a baseline fantasy production. 10, 12, 15 fantasy points, especially if they cross the goal line. Low end, if they're getting starter snaps, 8, 9-ish. Those backups turning into starters off the waiver wire become hot commodities in drafts. But you also want to pay attention to the wide receiver position. And going over these again, Terry McLaurin, Christian Kirk, T. Higgins, George Pickens, and Amari Cooper in the 4th round. If you go another running back in the 4th round, you're going to have to forego some of these wide receivers. Now you have to go hard in the paint at wide receiver. So your wide receiver 1 is probably going to be like a Marquise Brown, a Jaden Reed, a Calvin Ridley, Deontay Johnson, Christian Watson, maybe George Pickens, T. Higgins. If you're lucky, if the rest of your league did not hammer wide receiver, maybe you're in a league and 2 or 3 guys really went hard in the paint at wide receiver. Because all it takes is 2 or 3 people to really kill the pool at wide receiver, while you and maybe another guy is hammering out running backs, and that pool just got depleted, and now you're going for scraps here at the wide receiver position. But you're looking at your wide receiver 1 here, possibly being George Pickens, T. Higgins, maybe Amari Cooper, come back with a Marquise Brown or a Keenan Allen or a Deontay Johnson, Christian Watson type as your wide receiver 2 or 3. Can you live with that, having 3 deep at running back, possibly 4 deep? Because some people take that to extreme as well. That's part of the strategy. You're going robust. But the thing is, you're feeling good at running back at the start of the season. You know if one goes down, you got 2 or 3 more to go off of. You got that. But also, opportunity cost. Because when you start looking at these running backs, you can't look at these later round or mid-round running backs. And we got some juice here at round 6 and round 7. Round 8 too, because some of these round 7 backs leak in. Depending on your draft, they leak down to round 8. And round 8's got some backs. You're looking at some upside flyers in the back after the draft. You're foregoing some of these guys because you're FOMOing at wide receiver and tight end. That is something to look at. Joe Mixon's a round 5 pick in FFPC. Rachaad White's round 4 in FFPC. Round 6, though, for Underdog. Can you forego Kenneth Walker? Can you look at him while there's an wide receiver on the board, but you need that position because you drafted 3 or 4 running backs deep? Can you do that? That is the question. The draft has to go right for you as well, because these positions at wide receiver and tight end, they could get froze up, and you're looking at the lower tiers of the players. But when we look at a mock draft here, just closing our eyes, looking at the players off the board in those ranges here, drafting from the 106 spot, using your first 3 picks at running back, you can get very strong at the running back position, especially if the draft goes your way. Say you go Brees, Saquon, Kyron, you're going to feel good about that. And then after that, you really are baited into just pounding the wide receiver position here, and you're really going wide receiver after wide receiver, and you're not really going wide receiver 1 for wide receiver 2. You're looking for wide receivers who are good to stream too, like George Pickens, Marquise Brown, Christian Watson, Jordan Addison. You're really just trying to stack up at the position while trying to get your tight end. And if you're chasing the wide receiver, you might be stuck in a spot where you're probably just streaming tight end because the top tier tight ends came off the board earlier than expected. So you're getting like a Tyler Lockett on the back end. Maybe once you hit double-digit rounds, you're feeling good at going running back again. Maybe you're lucky you can catch a Gus Edwards down there. But when you look at the lineups here for a draft like this, how do you feel about this? And this might be too optimal, but Joe Burrow, Brees Hall, Saquon, George Pickens, Marquise Brown, Christian Watson, you're streaming tight end, Kyron Williams, Gus Edwards, Tyler Lockett as your other flexes, depending on how deep your league goes. But if you triple up at running back, you're deep. You're deep. You got a good base there. You could win a league if you're going 3 deep running back, because sometimes you have to, because the draft ends up like that. You catch some deals in the draft and you just have to take that running back, and next thing you know, you got a couple extra running backs than what you're planning to go for in the draft, but you got good deals on them. Like Bijan fell 3 picks more than he should have, and you just drafted him. Same thing with another running back in the 2nd round. Next thing you know, another running back falls in the 3rd, and you're like, what the heck just happened? And now I got to chase some wide receivers and really add some depth to my team, especially on the top end at the wide receiver spot. When you look at these savages who draft running back 4 rounds deep and just keep it going, there are times, but it's not likely, where you accidentally draft 4 running backs straight. But if you are one of these savages, this might be something you're walking away with, like a Bijan, Jonathan Taylor, Derrick Henry, Isaiah Pacheco, and that might be too good. That's just working off ADP, closing my eyes and just picking the closest running back there for the rounds. And now you got to make things happen. You also got to shoot for some upside at wide receiver, and then foregoing the running backs, possibly or hopefully in the middle to later rounds. and maybe you get a tight end in 9th or 10th round and you're streaming still and you're getting quarterback late, that's also pushing you into other strategies here and what to look for. But you look at the lineup, it's not horrible, but you are moneyballing the wide receiver position. You may not like that. You got to hit on a rookie. You got to hit on a young guy. You got to play the waiver wire correctly with wide receiver, and that's kind of harder to do compared to running back, because running back, once the starter goes down, the backup comes in, likely getting those touches, and you can forecast it a little easier. When a starting wide receiver goes down, the backup wide receivers do not necessarily get those same targets. The targets kind of just funnel out to the rest of the pass catchers, or the pass game slows down a lot more. The whole offense slows down, and next thing you know, the wide receiver 2 on that team that's supposed to step in to be the wide receiver 1 is giving you similar results, and nobody's really stepping up. Where for running backs, at least you know the next man up is going to get some more touches, and you're just praying to God that he crosses the goal line. And I think that a lot of people like this strategy because they feel good at being strong at running back. They don't mind being weak at wide receiver, and they do win leagues because they strike gold at wide receiver and tight end, and you can do that. You can do that. Also, if you're going 4 rounds straight, good luck to you, because in this day and age, people are paying up for wide receivers in the drafts, making it harder for you to win that way. But if you're in a home league and you go 4 running backs straight, maybe some wide receivers do fall. Some people will start FOMOing the running back position, not being patient, and you can actually strike some gold at wide receiver. Maybe that can turn out for you, but you're going to have some tough choices at wide receiver, tight end, and quarterback, even at running back, because you're going to have to forego that position to really hit at these. But it is possible to win. It's just, I don't like being that weak at the wide receiver position. I give it a C+ because the wide receiver position is going to be way too weak for me. I do not like being that weak at the wide receiver position. I like having one of the top tier wide receivers, building out my running back core after that. Maybe hero RB, late round RB this year's fine, but getting one of the top running backs feels a little bit more optimal. But winning at wide receiver and both running back is probably the way to go this year, considering the fragility at both positions, considering the pool at wide receiver is very deep, which means you also got to cash in on the top end of that pool as well at wide receiver. We'll get more into that when we talk some other strategies. But when it comes to robust RB, I think you can win leagues with it. It's just really not my preference. I can see the upside with it. I can see why some people like it, but I can also see why a lot of people don't like it. Let me know what you think in the comments below. Make sure to hit that subscribe button on the way out. I want to thank you for watching. Catch you on the next video.